All right, welcome back to Good Old Boys number 5. Today we've got the Swolosopher King, Oliver Lee Bateman, here with us.
What's up, folks?
And Bog Beef. All right. When I think of Bateman, what you do is you feel like if you explain to people, if someone takes a gander at your CV, it's going to be a little bit of telling a small child like that Santa Claus isn't real. Whenever you see a slick politician on TV, there's a teleprompter. And that teleprompter is a portal to some other place with basically you're going to find Bateman also going to be on the other end. He's the one feeding this in. I like to think that you've written hundreds or thousands of college application essays.
I've written double whatever you think I've written, probably, for money.
Yeah. In my head, I'm looking at the review board, and those essays are just covered with big, soggy tears of just the
Yeah, I love to tell the same sob story over and over again when a client is like, I can't tell my own story. I need somebody with some distance.
Do they request like extra sad stories?
Yeah. Just be as personal as you can, but make it up. Right?
That's the most 2019 shit I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Tell my truth. Tell the story of my Me Too. All right. Only you could tell it.
The ultimate Bateman moment would be someone Me Tooing somebody in a major online publication, and then the record executive response is also written by Bateman.
Oh, that's my dream. That's my dream. If I can author 2 takes behind the scenes that neither of which is bylined by me, but they are actually, they're in conflict, then I have hit the pay dirt. That could possibly go on forever.
Yeah, just this internal monologue of one shoulder and the other just splayed out before the blogosphere.
Obviously, this makes you pretty cynical. The more you see this, the more cynical you get. But you also get really fascinated. You realize it's all sort of a game, or at least even people who seem to think it's sincere will, when it comes down to it, when the rubber hits the road, they're going to be telling you, "Oh man, I need this. I need a real tearjerker on this one. Tell me about being born poor or something. Just go at it. Get beat up
or black child.
Yeah, just dig in." And then I literally just regurgitate the same experiences I had growing up in like southwestern Pennsylvania and West Virginia and North Carolina. I just regurgitate them and put some different package. Sometimes I even use the same sentences. And it's personal, right? Like the whole thing is just some kind of arbitrary exercise, whether it's somebody's personal essay or a college application essay or whatever. It's all very arbitrary. But you need to cross off these boxes, and people are taking advantage of that. They're like, I need to get in there. I need to have my oppression articulated, because I haven't had any. So I need a pro to bring this to the forefront. And that's what I can do. I can tell them how you, meaning me, have been oppressed throughout your life.
When some people, they're not even making money off this, right? This is just something they're doing for what they call clout.
The best thing was when I first got started doing this in like 2011, 12, writing people's HuffPost blogs that they would not get paid for, but that I would get $100 or $50 or something for. And as their clout grew, I was sort of pulled into their world, and I got to know them. And I got to know all kinds of intimate details about them as well, or, things that were really rough. I mean, I wrote an essay about this for Splice Today, which is one of the few publications that lets you just do whatever you want and pays you for it, which I love. I actually just wrote like an expose that here's what I've done and what I do on the side, in addition to my actual writing. And nobody was shocked at all. But these folks helped me get a leg up into, selling my own writing. But my own writing is very different than all this. It's just genuine old school access coverage of bodybuilding and wrestling and all that stuff. But I've got sources, I've got the background in it, academic, personal, all that stuff. I'm able to actually do decent work, and I'm able to keep it coming, which is great. Like Mel Magazine, great. I work for them. The Ringer, great. Whenever a wrestler dies, cash register rings. Those guys probably leaving more money to me than they are to their kids. Sad to say, but I'm more puzzled by the wokeconomy. I guess that's what I call it, like the wokeconomy. Like there's this world of takes and people revealing things about their lives. It seems like it's all filtered through these lenses that we expect the stories to be like this. That, of course, this is true. Of course, this is a wise person. Of course, this is a person who has, suffered. And the people that listen to this or the people that read this are just so credulous. And it's crazy. You should scrutinize everything that you read, no matter what. But they don't. And so these stories are just out there, and I don't even know what people get out of them. But, the ones that aren't ghost written aren't any better, and they're probably not any truer in many cases, because the personal essay is just a lot of BS usually.
You were birthed out of the same sort of geological process there in Pittsburgh that used to produce the outside linebackers and fullbacks.
Yeah. College wrestling champions, great football players, all that stuff. I just happened to end up working. My real job is in business operations and HR for a huge facility maintenance company. So that's a real meatball job, if you will. But this writing, I've just kind of fallen into this writing, and it is sort of. It's as if someone that was intended for one thing does this other thing because he figured out that he can do it. And, I enjoy doing it. I've gotten to do some good stories and I think stories that I would have liked to read when I was 17 or 18, I would have enjoyed reading the stuff that I write. And that's actually the one thing that keeps me going with the writings under my own byline. I try to do stories that I would have liked to have read a long time ago. And that's the audience. My only audience is that. If the story is something that I would have liked at 17, because you guys know, like, there's a lot of people whose interest, they might not, have wrestled, they might not have lifted weights a lot, but like their interests cycle around all those things,
Sure.
And there's still a need for somebody to write about that, and there's nobody else really stepping up to write these things. There's a lot of people who. That might have, they watched their first anime and they want to write a hot take about it, or they lifted weights at the gym and then they want to write about the culture and gender and everything at the gym, but they haven't really lived it, and they haven't grown up with it. And it's very artificial as a result. So there's always going to be this gap. And the other thing is, I've just got a Rolodex of these people that I can pull up, get quotes from, get in the story, move to the next one. And I'm glad that people use me that way. Like I'm truly glad to be doing that type of work.
Yeah, I remember when Henry Rollins started writing about lifting weights, it just went from his pen to the wall of every gym because no one else was doing it.
That's a really great point. That essay he wrote in Details magazine, the iron, at the time I thought it was like the greatest, most profound thing ever written, and I was like, well, I'm an outsider kid lifting weights, and the iron is true, it doesn't lie. It does if you're bouncing the weight off your chest or something like that. But in terms of just giving me something to motivate, and seeing him in concert and stuff, like he's a short, not very big guy.
Seen him 3 times.
But to me, he was like the first notable weightlifter that was like, a sharp guy, an articulate guy. And I was like, well, you can combine all these, because in the 90s, you didn't have access to all this stuff. And gradually I dug in and learned about other writers like Sam Fussell, bodybuilder turned memoirist, really interesting book, Muscle. I learned about and got to know, and I'm friends with Bob Paris, the famous bodybuilder, famous for coming out on Oprah in 1992. There's a guy that was way too far ahead of his time. Like he jumped the gun on that. Do that 5 years ago, and you would have been poised for this world economy. But do it in 92, and kind of a here and there, and you also just not the type of guy that you'd another guy who's just like a sort of a country boy at heart, just straight, but it is really interesting, in that sense. I'm fast. Like Rollins was the point of entry for me, and you really hit the nail on the head with that.
The bodybuilding world, and to a lesser extent the wrestling world, especially because bodybuilding back, like you're talking about in the 90s and stuff, it was such a freak show that it seemed like a natural home for. You needed to be okay with alienation, not really having context to your existence. Kind of, does that make sense?
I think that's right. The people that were obsessives about that sport, and then later the people that, and I wrote a piece about this for Mel with the help of some of the real legends of the old steroid forums. You had to be a true, like those people were truly isolated from the mainstream. There were some people who were just fans, and they just like knew everything about these big muscle-bound men, and then there were people that were participants. So it was like kind of a 50-50 split. Like you go to a bodybuilding event, you've got all these admirers and fans, and then you've got the other 50% are people that want to be mistaken for being in the show. You know, that's like their dream. Like, hey, dude, do you compete? That's what they want to be asked. Like everybody. So their training is built. It's like if they go to a gym or they go to the gym that night and they want to be the biggest, strongest guy in the gym, and they might have nothing to say, but their dream is just for somebody to ask them, hey, dude, do you compete? I mean, compete in what? There's really no money in this.
You know, I went to one of those in the 90s, but it wasn't a professional one. It was one for like the high school district. But like all those guys had the exact same attitude. I mean, they were high school kids, so they weren't like benching that much. You know, they had the headphones blaring the rock music before they went up. You could tell every one of them felt like they were peak Arnold.
Yeah, no. I mean, at those amateur meets, and I've been to a bunch of those. I've had, I've dragged my wife even through those because sometimes they're 10 hours. You know, if you're 10 hours to do like 2 minutes of work, everybody there just dreams of being thought of as like the world's strongest man. Now, I mean, that's the far cry from what you ever see. Even when you see some really impressive stuff, you know, it's so far from what the top dogs are doing. Doesn't matter, but that's exactly the attitude on display. And it starts early. I mean, some guys, like you said, 16, 17, 18, they think they go around like they're seasoned pros. And it's kind of funny to see. I was never like that. I always just sort of sat back and watched these people. And it was interesting to watch them train. A lot of those guys burn out. I've never suffered any type of injury exercising or participate in sports in my life because I never do anything that would hurt. You know, like I don't need to be the fastest pushing the truck. I've had a lot of competitions where I have, potentially been able to win an event, but something just holds me back from killing myself to do it. There's just like something I don't have. I can't turn it on. It's like, I don't want to die for the bench press, I just don't want to die for it.
Well, that's every athletic competition, right? It's literally whoever wants it more.
Yeah, I have this shirt from the drill website that says, I was born in the gym and I will die in the gym. That's a great summing up of what some of these guys would like to do. I think they'd like to die after they hit their PR. And then it might even just be at an event where they don't even get any money. They get like a T-shirt for winning, but they did it.
Lying there in the casket with the fanny pack on.
Yeah, his shoulder just completely ripped off. Esophagus just trashed, crushed. I mean, but they did it. Or they didn't do it, but they died trying. They went all out. That to me was always the interesting thing about athletics, but particularly athletics with no possibility of future reward. Like you're going to kill yourself for this interleague softball game, but it's particularly bad among these these like amateur bodybuilders and amateur power lifters. These guys, either that or they're these old men. There's two types of old men. There's the ones that will tell you not to do deep squats, who are like old fools, and then there are the ones who actually are really useful, and they will sit back and mentor you for various reasons. They probably have all kinds of issues as well, but they actually, like most of my improvements in form over the years came when like some old long-time competitor would step aside and work with me on this or that. It's an odd culture among those people, but I love it. At the same time, I love it. It's just like to be in it for 20 some years, just study these people. It's just really interesting. It's a slice of Americana that you can't find just stepping in it today. Like you can't make up for 20, 25 years of just starting with this and then digging into it, muscle magazines under the bed, all that stuff.
Do you still keep up with wrestling, Bateman?
Yeah. There's so much of it that I have all the streamings, because those are tax deductible come the end of the year, out of the business expenses. So I got streamings for everything I could potentially write about. But the thing is, I have to pick and choose. Like if I hear, well, that's a good match, I've been following. I usually follow fat or really muscular wrestlers because that's going to be what I'm going to probably write about. So if Keith Lee, who's like 330 pounds, very agile, is doing something, I'm going to tune in for that because that's potentially a story. But knowing the whole flow of a given card, or even watching a whole pay-per-view, I'll fast forward those things. There's like one match per thing that I need to look at. So it's just like with reading. Like I read the chunks of the stuff that I need to get the work done, you know? And so I don't get to consume it the way I did when I was, 10, 12. You just have it on. Or if I had all these old VHS tapes, and I could just watch them over and over again and just memorize these matches. I cannot do that. I don't have enough time to do that now. And so but that background is actually useful, because if you need the obituary the next day or in 2 hours, it's like, I need 3,000 words in 4 hours. I've got it ready to go. I've read their autobiographies. I've, watched them for years. I already know the angle on what's going to go down with them. So they've been good. I mean, that's good to me. But man, in terms of watching the current product, nah. I mean, I watch it, but it's like freaking work.
It feels. I mean, I don't know if it's just because I'm old now, but it feels different. Like watching the WWF when I was a kid, like Jake the Snake was my favorite wrestler. The last time I tuned into wrestling, there was an Irish guy who painted his body to look like a monster, and he was doing like performance art.
Oh, Sheamus? Like the mid 2000s with the red hair?
No,
or was it Finn Balor doing his demon?
That guy.
Okay. Yeah, he goes on and off with that makeup. I mean, he does that himself. I don't know how long that could take. He only does it for special events now, but yeah.
Do you think that's the same demographic? They're going after the same demographic they were back in the day? Because it doesn't feel like, okay, so not just me.
Wrestling, right? Wrestling today is totally for wrestling nerds, and there's a lot of them. It's for like people that critique, they're watching every Japanese match right now, and in the online readership sense, like. The people that consume it now, a lot of them are very, very seasoned fans and seasoned nerds. When we watched Jake the Snake or something like that, or we watched King Kong Bundy, it was still coming out of a very primitive era. The guys had a lot of control of their own characters. A lot of it was random. Like if Jake the Snake came up with some catchphrase on the spot and it hit, I mean, he could get a year's worth of work out of it. And those guys, I mean, it was kind of this creative, sort of still scummy Americana.
Yeah.
But today, they're still not, yeah, exactly. Today, they're still not workers. They don't work for they're not going to work for All Elite Wrestling either. And they don't work for Ring of Honor. They're all just 1099 contract workers. But it's almost like they're corporate employees. They go to trainings. They're constantly monitored. The guys are in great shape.
Oh, yeah. They're in better shape than ever. I live in the rural South. And when I was a kid, it was huge. Everybody watched wrestling. Everybody watched Hogan, Macho Man. And as time went on, fewer people watched, but that was like Steve Austin, that era, The Rock. A lot of people I knew still watched wrestling. I couldn't tell you the last time I heard another shit kicker talk about WWE.
What killed me, growing up in North Carolina, I moved there in '89. Like I began watching the TBS World Championship Wrestling product heavily in '89. And that was all those old refugees from the Southern wrestling era still on TV, the Dusty Rhodeses and all those guys. So it was a truly Southern product. It was like a hillbilly. It was like a hillbilly redneck product, Guys had mullets. It was like all the mulleted wrestlers were, with the kind of like chubby bodies were in WCW till like 94 when they signed Hogan. That to me, like the South loved that. Like you could pack the Greensboro Coliseum with those guys to watch them just, kind of slash each other's foreheads open. That's what the South wanted to see. I liked it when it was a regional product. I liked it. I like NASCAR when it was a regional product.
Jeff Gordon.
I don't like things when they expand beyond that original thing.
There's one Good Old Boys listener who's going to love that part where you said that you don't read it front to back, but
Oh, no way. I don't have time.
We connect the first two and just ask you straight up. Was Scott Steiner on 365 a year?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they call it blasting and cruising. Yeah, he was probably on 365. Yeah.
In bodybuilding, they have an off season. They spend like 3 months of the year on like a gram or two of sauce.
Yeah. Some of them, I mean, depends on the guy, but yeah, they have, and the programs are all different, and they're, for some of the top guys, they're carefully guarded. They all have different.
Hey, gentlemen,
bodybuilding today really is.
A quarter of our audience is probably people with MFAs, so you might need to explain what sauce is and what you're talking about when you're talking about.
Wow. Yeah, we're talking about steroids, guys. Blasting and cruising means taking steroids year round. No layoffs at all. And a lot of pro wrestlers did that through the 80s and 90s because they These guys, when you're using steroids correctly, to preserve your fertility and your keep your testosterone levels up, guys, when you're cycling, you want to have blood work done. You want to take, appropriate drugs, usually anti-estrogen drugs.
Yeah, you don't end up like McMahon.
Yeah,
get you a nice rack going on there.
Yeah. You want to take precautions, and you want to make sure you're working with or reading at least the work of like a good steroid guru like Dan Duchesne or my friend Anthony Roberts. One of these people, or paying one of them to do your programming for you. I mean, Duchesne's dead; you can't pay him for anything, but these other folks, there's plenty of gurus around that'll line you up with this stuff. And I mean, a big wrestler like Scott Steiner, the funny thing about Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner is if you look when they wrestled at Michigan in the early 80s, they probably weren't on anything and they were still big dudes. I mean, they probably hadn't learned, but by the time Rick Steiner, because he was the first one that got signed, by the time Rick Steiner gets signed by Mid-South Wrestling in the mid-80s, he is as jacked in 86. If you look up Rick Steiner, he's as jacked in 86, 87 as Scott Steiner was in 98, 99. Scott Steiner got huge later in his career because he wanted to look like his idol, superstar Billy Graham. I mean, he wanted to have that bleach blonde look finally. He used to have a mullet before that, like a big brown mullet. But, yeah. I mean, Papa Pump's chest is also screwed. I mean, that's his nickname. Scott Steiner's nickname is Big Papa Pump. His chest is really screwed up these days, if you take a look at it. He's, I don't know what happened there, if it was a torn pec once or twice, or if he had actual, development of breast tissue or what. Something's wrong with that area. He's still a huge man, though. Running a Shoney's. He owns a Shoney's. That's very Southern.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Breakfast on Sunday after church, right?
Yeah, there's a Twitter for it. And like I think his Twitter is his Shoney's Twitter.
That is so fucking Southern.
Everyone, you got to follow Bateman's writing. The big right-wing thinker on Twitter right now, Bronze Age pervert, he talks a lot about bodybuilding and stuff like that.
What does he say?
One of the things he says is, well, you read this philosopher, you read that philosopher. Is this guy right? Is that guy right? Who should I vote for? You don't know anything. But the one thing that is just an objective rock that you can hang your hat on is basically bodybuilding, your body, all this kind of stuff. And once you start reading Bateman stuff, you go, I don't know about that. This can go all kinds of different ways. I love what you wrote where you were talking about the concept transgender is huge right now.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
It's fundamentally a concept, testosterone and estrogen. You were theorizing like, well, what if somebody was like, what if I wanted to identify as not really identify? I'm going to screw this up. Maybe you can handle it, but there is no objective home base for how much testosterone is flowing through. There's 80-year-old guys walking around jacked with a rock hard dick these days, and that's not really natural.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. J.K. Simmons, Jeff Bezos, these guys are all, I don't want to, allegedly using. I want to make sure I say allegedly, but these guys are all visiting the doctor. I mean, I did some work with a doctor at Brian Mealing in New York, who just. He would treat athletes and, older folks and stockbrokers. And, in 6 months, these guys, they might not develop like the strength to be great power lifters, but a regimen of good, like medical grade HGH and medical grade testosterone, you'll look great in 6 months. I mean, you'll have veins and your gut will go away. And that's what people want. Your hairline might recede a little bit. Take your poison. So bald men like Jeff Bezos, there's nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's all a win for them.
There's so many celebrities, especially, I don't know, around that time that Balco thing came out, you started.
Yeah.
I remember when 50 Cent video came out, he was looking like, there had been big guys in videos and in music and stuff, but he was pretty big.
Well, the big example in rap music, and folks who are listening should look it up, is Dr. Dre. Google what Dr. Dre looked like in the NWA era, kind of like a chubby boy and like a big loose t-shirt, to what he looks like now, which is like an MMA fighter.
Well, just watch an action movie from like the 80s or 90s. It didn't star Stallone or Schwarzenegger. Just regular guy. Like, look at like Bruce Willis's physique in Die Hard.
Kurt Russell, Bruce Willis. Two normal look fit guys.
Yeah, and compare that to now. Every Hollywood actor is what would have been considered jacked 20, 30 years ago.
I mean, Hugh Jackman is a great, which his name works in all kinds of ways. I mean, he's in that lavender marriage to that woman that's like 20 years older than him. So Jackman was working just all over, and he's also jacked. He's a jacked man now, but he's like a Broadway song and dance guy who came to like public eye in like a cross-dressing movie. And then somehow he's playing Wolverine. And like when he's 30 and playing Wolverine for the first time, it looks like he's gone through a year of training, but he just looks like kind of a fit 30-year-old. By the time he's in like, the one where they go back to the future or something, and they meet the young X-Men, he looks like, he's like a just ripped to shreds. I mean, he's covered. He's got like, they have like a scene of his naked rear end, and he's got like veins in his rear end.
Get into these conversations, people would say, there's no way that guy's on sauce. There's no way that guy's on sauce. And I would say, look, here's what you do. I wonder if you agree. I would say, go look up, you can go find natural bodybuilding. And it's basically volunteer. I think they do random tests and stuff, but the amount of money it takes to actually test people, because you have to basically just pop up at their house at a random 4 hours or whatever to find out. But I would say go look up those and go look up at who wins and compare them to whoever you're talking about, because people just aren't there's just no such thing basically as dudes sitting around at 200 pounds, 210 pounds, shredded.
No.
Well, this goes back to the thing we were originally talking about, where our boy Oliver's writing first-person narratives for other people. They figured out a long time ago that how well advertising worked. Madison Avenue had this shit on lockdown, but it had diminishing returns, and people started to recognize they were being marketed to, and they didn't like that. So now the new marketing is pretending that you're not marketing to somebody while you're doing it.
That's right.
It's all about authenticity. So Oliver talks about these fitness influencers all the time, and they all say they're absolutely not on juice, right?
Or they say nothing about it. Because they're so much of their image is tied up in either selling like natural foods or some kind of fake ass diet to look like them. There's a few who are open about it, like my friend Chris Bell, the filmmaker that did the Bigger, Stronger, Faster movie, and his brother Mark. I mean, they've just been open about use for a long time, and that was kind of their thing. That's what catapulted them to being famous. But you'll even look and see stuff about Mark Bell, who's benched 600 pounds, raw without a shirt on and stuff like that. You'll say like, oh, he couldn't have done it without steroids. It's all weak. He's weak inside. He needs that. This is like, random internet commenters saying this, when then they're praising Larry Wheels. You guys got to look up Larry Wheels. This like 28, 29-year-old freak. They call him a genetic freak, but I mean, if genetics are the ability to handle steroids very well. I mean, that's what genetic freak means to me. Like, well, he didn't have a heart attack. His cholesterol's in check. He must be genetic freak. His body was really meant to handle steroids. He's not covered in acne. His face isn't bloated. So there's somebody that was built for steroids, just like a beef cow, like a strain of beef cow that takes real well to him or something. But Larry Wheels, people will compare him to say Mark Bell and say like, oh, look at Larry Wheels, what he's doing. He's benching 700 pounds. Well, I mean, that guy was, has been linked to trainers, quote unquote, like this trainer Gilberto Mundo that I know, who was indicted for steroid distribution. I think he ratted some people out because he never got. I think he did because he never got put away. But I even included his indictment in an article about his fitness influence profile. Both of those things. My buddy Anthony pulled that, I mean, Gilberto has taught a lot of these guys how to use the sauce, supposedly, and it's interesting. I mean, Gilberto himself is like a huge 5'4" man. He's 5'4", but also huge, but also terrible at weightlifting, like really bad form, really bad, like quarter motion bench press, terrible squat, but he is huge. He is gigantic because, he's juiced to the gills. That stuff works independent of anything else. It will do the job much better than all the great training in the world. The only thing that will work better, it may be, or if you could force everyone to sleep 11 hours a night and eat 15 times a day,
Well, most of us just want to look better. We don't even care about how much we can listen.
That's all it comes down. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's all it should come down to, or being able to be functional, like being able to work out in the yard or pick up a gallon of milk and not huff and puff. Like there's a scene in Clerks, and in the Kevin Smith movie Clerks, where Dante picks up milk, and like the fitness meatheads, like you're huffing while you picked up that milk. I just thought that was kind of funny. I recently got quoted in an article about opening jars, and like the guy had reached out to me, read my article on gripping, and he was like, what does that say? And I was like, I don't know. I came from a family where anyone could open any jar, so I wasn't really ever concerned about it. But the good techniques to pull it close to your body, turn your whole shoulder into it, maybe put a towel over it. Like my dad would say, like, if you can't open this jar, I'm sorry for you. Maybe go back to school, lift a few weights. I don't know. Like, I can't help you, son.
Grip strength is one of those bugaboos that people, I see people mentioning especially when they're talking about, this is something near and dear to your heart, Bog Beef, the chemicals that are poisoning us in the environment, and they'll cite grip strength and,
oh, yeah, that's right. The right wing likes this. The National Review David French seems to write an article like every year about how he's trying to make his son a better gripper. Which, oh God Almighty! I mean, I can only imagine what that family life is like.
I want to go back to what we said about David French, because that was another great example of the thing that we were talking about originally, which is the authenticity, the authenticity factor, whatever you want to call it. So David French is obsessed with his son's grip strength.
Yeah. He wants to raise a true grip man, like a good gripper. In fact, I think the article, like, he wants his son to be stronger than he was, because he was, even though he was like an officer in the Army or Marines or something, I guess he's like someone that, like, my dad would have called, like, back in the day, like, there's like a jock sniffing element to his elite. He's an elite, but there's like a jock sniffing to it, except he's sniffing his son's jock.
There's that weird fetishized version.
Cargo cult.
Yes, and you know what they're sniffing at. What they're sniffing at is guys who turn wrenches and shit like that, or firemen who they pop the fire hydrant. That's how you get some forearms going on.
You find a farmer or somebody that's a mechanic. They're going to have actual thick fingers. They're going to have, you're going to get a firm shake out of them, and it's just those things are just an extension of their work. Like, they're actually working, and it's funny because that's going to be the last thing we automate. Those fine motions, those fine twisting motions and whatever. So those hands are going to be what people work with for a long time. But I tell you, you get a weak shake, you get a feeble shake, like a wet fish shake. And or a hand just disappears into your hand when you shake it. It's just, you wonder, you don't feel like, it's not like that anybody needs to have a good grip nowadays or anything, but there are all kinds of like, instinctive reactions we have to it. I'm not talking about this kind of crude biological determinism or anything like that, but I just mean people react to a firm grip one way or the other, or they, a truly weak or like a hand that's like as soft as a pillow, there's something about that,
Well, and that's what they're afraid of, and that's what they're trying to correct with all these excessive displays. It's like if David French was a mechanic, he wouldn't worry about his son's.
That's absolutely right. It would be his son might be getting taught by him how to work on cars, but the son also wouldn't be like self-conscious. Like my dad, raised my half brother, in the car dealership. Like, he was in it. He was the parts manager at 16, but it was just part of life, and so he flowed into that working world naturally. And I don't think has ever once thought about his grip or whether the American man is losing his masculinity. He did name his son Stone.
Yeah, Romans were saying the same shit 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And they, similar circumstances. You had people, some true kooks, retreating to the monasteries and rolling around in hair shirts. All that, all the stuff that comes with the end of the empire. Some weird ideas. The strength of weakness becomes a real big deal, or the idea that some are saying we're all becoming weak, and then some people are pushing this, the strength of weakness narrative to try to build their brands, one or the other.
Calf implant guy was too ahead of the game when it came to this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that guy was a real canary in a coal mine. Everyone will remember that show of him like limping on the beach after he got these pieces of silicone shoved in his legs.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. I mean, why do we give him a show? But like the idea of putting a useless ball in a muscle that, I mean, you look at some great jumpers in the NBA and their calves are like little sticks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not important. High calf is fine. It's not important. It's not a functional. I mean, as long as it functions, how it's going to be shaped is irrelevant. But this guy wanted a big calf. What do you think about like when you want a big calf? Like that's just what you want.
Fat guys who have big calves.
Yeah, sometimes they have them like tree trunks because they're carrying around all that mass during the day.
Especially with the internet, with people, I wonder how much like you see so much of that weird gay fetish version of masculinity.
Yeah, it's kind of the spread, and been mainstreamed in an interesting way.
Yes, it's very fucking bizarre, and you also see whenever you see like women, this is one of these things. There's been such a huge reaction against what we would call SJW stuff that there is a lot of stuff in there that's true, and one thing is about people writing about the opposite sex, and I love when you read women characters written by men. Sorry, but they don't complain. Pointing this out to Merrick, there'll be this alluring woman in like a book or a video game or something, and they don't complain. Once you've reached a certain age, you no longer buy that. You're like, I'm sorry.
It's uncanny valley.
Yeah, all of the like heroines of Mass Effect 2, really make it to the end without a single need for a nap or, having a rough day.
Spaceship's too cold. Thermostat.
Yeah, that's right. That was a big war. The AC wars.
It was? Okay.
Like that's not what attracts you, but once you hit your mid-30s, you know that you're like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be very attracted to this woman, and there has not been a word of nagging or complaining. It feels wrong. Like I can see there's the what do you call it when the simulation is a
uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That is exactly right. Yeah, you realize that what you're really becoming what they're trying to attract you to is a male writer.
Oh God.
It's the male writer in a kind of writerly disguise who's unable to fully render this character.
That's the one positive development I think in the last few months that I've noticed, especially in the online, the woke online world. There's a little bit more room for do a disclaimer. There's some room for people to admit that men and women are different. That you kind of would get in arguments about before. Of course, now you can get fired from your job for it. But I think it seems to me in private, people are more willing to just admit that now.
Well, I think part of the shift is just while acknowledging that there were a lot of valid points about different social movements and stuff like that. Like the presentation of it in the online format is tiresome because it's so much like it's almost like you're using this stuff, this theory, doing the work, the discourse. You're using this to like sell toothpaste or mouthwash, and I'm not really excited to hang out with Listerine either. You know what I mean, like that.
Gillette razor, yeah.
It just doesn't do it, and so I think that gradually, as this just becomes, as more corporations adopt it, that's going to be the thing. As more corporations adopt it, the youth are going to walk it back. I mean, we're just not, unless the corporations just, begin buying us one by one. I mean, we're not going to. We won't enjoy this. We need a different type. Every generation needs its own advertising language. So we're going to walk it back because we're not going to want Dove soap necessarily dictating the terms of received morality. We're not going to want Chex Mix, telling us, we want Chex Mix out of the bedroom the same way I wanted Tipper Gore away from the music.
Well, if every generation has its own kind of advertising, then ours has got to be viral, right?
Yeah.
That's the way they're doing it.
What's the viral and, like we said earlier, authentic? Like get an influencer to say it. But now I think I think we're also realizing that all these personalities whose lives are pure advertising, I think we're beginning to recognize, I mean, I'm certainly allowed to write, that they're just full of crap, you know, and they're.
Yeah, you'll say that, and then people will still pay you to write stuff for them, which is hilarious to me. I guess there's no shame in it for them. Why should there be? They're getting what they want out of it.
Yeah.
But I would feel like a giant idiot paying somebody to do that. You know, when he's laying the whole game out for everybody.
Yeah, I do that many times in all these articles. People can dig back through the stuff that I've done. I will just expose the game over and over again. I'll expose it in articles where somebody gave me an interview, and then I'll interview that person again a couple months later. Either they don't read the interview, or they're just happy to have their name mentioned.
They don't. You know, there was a joke a couple years ago on Twitter. That was somebody said, you know, in the future the economy is just going to be everybody paying each other for Uber rides. That's true, but they got it wrong. It's going to be everybody's just subscribing to each other's Patreon. And I don't think that half this content is anybody. They might listen to it, they might read it, but they don't absorb any of it. It's just, oh yeah, I saw this piece and whatever. And
I did this one, and you guys might not have read it, but it's worth reading if people haven't. I did this one for Mel where, like in 2017, I was at this. I was taken over to Slovakia to watch, C-section and how stem cells are harvested and stuff. Yeah, like a publicist. I always work with publicists. You know, a lot of these journalists are like, I never work with publicists. I work with them. I just don't give them what they want in the end. You know, send me that yoga mat. Never going to write that article. It's okay. Send me that mattress. You bet. 2 of them. You know, I got my buddy a free Casper mattress that way. I mean, I don't care. Weight equipment, whatever you want to send me. Got an electroshock therapy, device. That's called the Compex Muscle Stim. I mentioned them once in a Vice article, and it wasn't even like praise. It was just a mention of the thing.
If Dante had to do it over again, I think he would have had to make a place for tow truck drivers and publicists.
So these publicists, I mean, and they get what they want. I'll hear them out. You know, I actually, a lot of these journalists are like, oh, I never work with them. These are the same people that like front their own expenses on stories and stuff. They're just rich. You know, like a lot of journalism, this millennial media especially, it's just these people, because I know what the salaries are. Like, you're making $45,000 in New York City. Like, that's like making 10,000 in Pittsburgh. You're getting some outside funding to live that pretend lifestyle, and media companies are benefiting from that. That's why the viewpoints, no matter who's writing them or what their other credentials are, what their other background is, they're probably extremely privileged, especially if they're in one of the metros. And maybe others will say, well, I'm not extremely privileged. My rent is still too high or something like that. No, man, the people that are truly underprivileged will never reach will never reach a position where they can articulate their stuff in front of an elite educated audience. It's just not going to happen. You know, by the time you've reached the status where you can do that, you aren't able to do it anymore. You know, you're not part of the world that you're supposedly talking about anymore. And that to me is real interesting. But these folks will always say, you know, and that's the whole principle of like New York Times Wirecutter. We buy all of our own products. You know, we don't get them from publicists. Well, great. You know, you're the New York Times. I mean, I'm happy to take your AI trainer. I'll never use it. But send it my way. New books, yeah, you bet. Free copies, bring them on. And I have gotten some fantastic articles out of just a publicist putting me in front of somebody like the great cartoonist Ben Catchor. That was a publicist hitting me up. Ben, I don't think Ben even knew he had Ben is the great, MacArthur Genius Grant winning cartoonist whose cartoons are just so bleak and miserable. I don't think he even knew he had a publicist, but the press that was publishing his book did. So I just ended up shooting the breeze with him about, politics and life. And I published that and mentioned he has a new book coming out. And that was it, but I got a great interview out of that. And there have been a couple other things like that where I don't know that I necessarily give them what they want, but it's a great way to meet people. And sometimes they have a really cool story to tell. So I don't, but it is amazing how many of them are hustling. Some of them, will just write like stories. Like if you go to a site like a magazine like Harper's Bazaar, I think that probably a quarter to half of that magazine is written out of press releases just prepared by publicists, cut and pasted into articles. And I say this allegedly, I don't know. I mean, I know publicists who do it. It really is. And they just cut and paste it in as boilerplate. Now that's garbage. Like that's not doing the work, as the kids say. You know,
David, you've gone so far beyond being canceled.
Oh, that's
You're not even on the map anymore.
No, because this is all stuff that nobody cares about. That's the funniest thing. I can say all the stuff that I say in all these articles, but nobody cares about it. You know, there's no political twist to anything I've written in the past 4 years, maybe 3 years, and even before that, it was really hard to tell what it was. It's just me exposing the game over and over, and it seems like doing that bothers no one.
Good example I've heard of this. Zizek was talking. Zizek says, I love opera. And you're like, opera? This is for the really hoity-toity. And Zizek says, yes. He says, yeah, the hoity-toity, they go there and they look at what each other's wearing. They don't give a fuck about what's going on stage. He says, so what's going on stage? You can do anything you want because they don't care about that. They're there to look at what each other's wearing.
To be seen.
That is absolutely right. I mean, the greatest patronage art was probably never consumed in any meaningful way maybe rare cases by the patron. So you could get away with murder.
You get these visits from people that are most likely your clients. And there's this feudal minor nobility class. Maybe they're got a couple too many pounds to make it in LA, to do runway work. They end up in their 30s. Okay, so I need to be an influencer, or I need to do something in politics, this kind of thing. And they come down from their world and they'll talk to you about the Green New Deal and shit like this. They're just from another planet, right? And they sort of come down. They're like, oh, they're here to score some points and then be whisked back off. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, we talked about this a lot. That these people are like this. If this was the Middle Ages, they'd be the second son. You ship off to crusades or the monastery or whatever. They're minor nobility who don't really have any use. And I'm sure Bateman has ghostwritten tons for these people, and that's like you said, they're not earning money from the work that he's doing for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, those late Romans, for example, in like 300 and 400 AD, who were deciding to embrace the celibate life, or battling against like Pelagius, who supported marriage. There was a big fight, it was marriage. I mean, there was that whole abolish the family thing then. Saint Jerome, very pro abolish the family. He lived with like a harem of nuns, but he was celibate, not in his youth when he was studying the classics like Virgil. He was very not celibate, but he was working the takes. He was also translating things, but he was like working the takes. Pushing his against Jovinian, anti marriage, anti family message is really, really powerful, and it's a hot take in my opinion. It's a hot take for somebody who, I think he was born in like modern day Yugoslavia or something like that, edge of the empire.
The Goths, yeah.
Family, the state holdings, getting pressed up against people invading and marauding. Yeah, so he needs to do something. And a lot of these would-be monks around that time just go head out to the desert, man. Like head out to the Far East and or Asia Minor. Sit on a pillar, wear a hair shirt, live in a cave, roll around, and you become a legend. Saint Anthony never touched himself. He was good. I mean, he was as holy a man as we ever had. He would rather cover himself in ants than have an impure thought. And I see a lot of that type of intellectual influencer class as that kind of like crazy moralizing element. There's a bit of Tipper Gore in them too. Wanting to shut down this or that album, play the album backwards, look for the hidden message, all that sort of nonsense as well. But it is tied up, like you guys said. I mean, they might be superfluous in some way, socially or culturally, but they got these accounts, and they've got a little bit of and so they say these things that the things are incoherent because like each separate thing is a point that might get them some retweets or something, or get them some likes, get them another sale of a hot take or something like that. So they're all over the map on opinions, and if someone Bog Beef has this opinion, I can't have it now. I got to have a different one. I gotta say Epstein offed himself. I can't possibly say anything else.
Don't say the E word.
Yeah, he's a bad boy.
If anyone like that is out there listening, you need to get a hold of Bateman.
Yeah, I'll make you famous.
I get this feeling I'm in Jurassic Park. We're in the Jeep. The T-Rex, he can't detect motion. And you just you get these, they sort of come visit. And they say all this crazy shit, and
that's right.
And you just kind of want to sit still. I wish we could just hook them up with you or whatever. Get them a page in the Verso catalog, because they're just there to hang out, to get something published. They can show their dad, so they can say they're going to be paying their rent in a couple of years. You're just like a prop. I don't know. I'm sorry. This is a.
I mean, I can tell you those books. I mean, your typical book advance. Like I've got an agent. I was unsuccessful once at selling a book proposal. Got a lot of the usual love the writing, hate the content, or hate the content, love the writing, generic feedback that they write. But I mean, in many cases that everyone will lie about how much they make, but you're probably looking at $10,000 advance. You won't earn it back. 15,000. Can't live on that. That's why I just do I write and I invoice what I write, and I'm happy to just keep selling writing. I'm not going to spend half a year chasing such a small thing. I mean, if it fell in my lap and someone was like, "Oh, I'll give you this much for this," yeah, sure, whatever, I'll do it. But I mean, those books are often, they're a thing that you can, in many cases, show your friends. Or none of the things that benefit me. Like I'm not in any social scene where I can say, "Oh, I've got an agent," I'm doing this. Oh, I've done this. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to. I like my editors. I like the publications I work for. They let me do what I want, and they pay me. And I mean, that's how I like that. That's how I look at that world. And I look around and I don't see that. I see maybe there's a few people who are struggling to make a true living out of it, but which you can't. You got to do something else.
Well, yeah, you said you're an
Yeah, I got a day job.
You got a day job as an HR guy. By night, you ghostwrite for people, and then I guess later by night you're lifting up a Chrysler LeBaron in your basement.
I built, and it's all remote, man. This house is built around all my interests. So like I can go deadlift and then come back up and answer some emails, then take some calls, and then go up to bed. And then, I got, it's just a home entertainment spot in one, and so I'm totally under a kind of house arrest in that way, but it's like the best kind.
How long have you been married?
Since 2012. That's another thing that sets you apart, 2012. Just a normal one too, just double work, working, managing the 401k, normal life, all that stuff. And that's the thing. I don't see a lot of that reflected. And I assume that still is how a lot of folks live.
Just not people we're talking to online.
No. And I mean, that, what do they call that? Like the normie lifestyle, normcore, normcore, like not having a meltdown on, like you'll never see, like I don't have a meltdown on Twitter. I don't go on there and say outrageous political things because I have a day job and I answer to people. And I also have no desire to say any of those things because those would, they're very like lame thoughts too. On top of it, there's very lame things to say. Like I'm not going to have a meltdown over Donald Trump on Twitter.
I'm always telling Merrick that I'm just constantly fantasizing about having a meltdown because it is such a luxury item.
Well, I came up, and this was amazing. I came up in the trenches with this guy Hugo Schweizer or Switzer, one of the first noted male feminists.
Yeah, I remember him.
You guys should read his story. Anybody's listening, read the LA Weekly article on his grift. And Hugo, and he was way ahead of his game. I think this was 2011 or 2012. He documented like trying to walk into the sea on Twitter. He also got circumcised so he could go on Ricky Lake and talk about that. So those are the two things you need to know about him.
All right. Okay.
He got a late life circumcision and went on Ricky Lake because that's worth it,
He was the one that banged his students, right? That was his thing.
Yes, that's right. You nailed it. Yes, that's what he's most notable, and not just like a few of them, all of them. And he had he's had some interesting comebacks recently on Medium and stuff. Like there's one essay that all the listeners should go listen to where he's clearly just trying to reinvent his brand and sort of get back out there, where he writes about how he's gotten back on Grindr and started the gay hookups again, which I didn't know. I didn't know it was bisexual. Like he's embraced that identity. He's telling the stories of doing it as an older man now. And just like, I mean, what are your kids going to think when you dig back in and that's your record of production, intellectual production?
Can you imagine somebody like this being your dad?
Yeah, that's
Hugo Schweitzer.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I know that's terrifying. Conventional and very normy to think of somebody being someone's dad these days. But yeah, can you just imagine, like, you know, I got my grandpa's like World War II submarine diary right next to me here, and a bunch of Japanese flags, a big stack of them, and all this stuff. So I know what that's all about. Like, I know what he did. And then, like, imagine being Hugo's son, and you're just online reading his rants about, you know, the limits of consent combined with the stories of seduction, and then his Grindr stories. And you're like, well, my dad he was kind of an internet marketer, I guess. Yeah. I don't believe, you know, maybe all that stuff happened, but he was kind of like an aluminum siding salesman, guys.
Isn't it worse if it didn't happen and he's writing that for posterity and it's not true?
That would be the best. What would be the best if all the rumors about the students and everything else, and like the only true thing turned out to be the circumcision? Like, you know, everything else, it turned out he was very normy. In fact, and it was all he was running a lifelong grift. And the big secret was none of it. He was not the porn professor. He was just totally bland and not interesting in any way. And I think whatever he's like, but like, yeah, just sit down, you know, go to Dad's website and just, or try to find his old content on the Wayback Machine. And you're just going through it, reading it. And, you know, it's so repetitive. Like I would encourage people to look up his body of work. Like, I swear he wrote the same article for Jezebel in the Atlantic over and over, like hundreds of times. Many of these articles just on, like, you know, light gender theory that you see online. I feel like I've been reading the same one for quite some time. It's like how I joke that every hot take should just be gaslighting, right? Like, Trump is gaslighting us, you know. I wrote a take for that magazine, Teen Vogue. They'll pay you $150 a take, but you get exposure. And it took them a year to run it, a year to get that piece done. From conception, which took 2 hours, to them actually editing my draft, it took 1 year.
I've been barking up the wrong tree, making jokes about paying Tommy Lauren to read off something for us. We slip Bateman $100 bill and get him to cook up a take for us.
Yeah, just a quick take. You know, whatever you guys need. You know, you want to go hard left, hard right, rad lib. You know, I got a variety of scales. You know, we got them all. You want to go old school centrist lib, pro Kristen Gillibrand lib. I got them all. I got one for everybody. You know, and we can even set it up so it's attacking the other positions to draw them out.
We'll pay him $200 and we'll get him to write a counter.
Yeah. You know, like, oh, you got your pro Gillibrand piece, so give me the pro Buttigieg piece. You know, we'll battle them out. You know, get them all in the mix. Whatever you want. And if you want one on Kermit the Frog being being domestic abused by Miss Piggy, I mean, I'll generate that one too. That's already out there, by the way. You guys can Google it.
No, I'm not going to do that.
I didn't write it. I didn't have any hand in it. A friend of mine did, but I didn't.
Peter Thiel, if you're listening, you want to get Japanese imperialism going again?
Yeah, let's do it. Bring it on. You know, let me see whatever crazy idea you put enough. And I mean, these guys could you could peel off, and you know, you could peel off a few of these take folks if you funded them well enough. Like, Elon Musk could be laying out his whole philosophy on Twitter through these intellectual influencers. You know, suddenly they could.
Well, some of them are. I mean, you can tell they are. You don't need to go any further than that. But
they're doing. The thing that gets me about influencers is the sort of, like, people are like, oh, it's a terrible thing to go on Joe Rogan. It's really stabbing us all in the back. You know, like Andrew Yang. Why did you go on Rogan? Bernie. Why did you go on Rogan? I can tell you for a fact that everyone listens to Rogan. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
he's phenomenal.
My dad
yes.
turned Joe Rogan podcast.
He's phenomenal at talking for 3 hours, and that's what he's really good at. That's his thing. He's kind of like every men's magazine rolled into one thing, and he's bald. He wasn't before, but he's kind of converged with Dana White of the UFC. They kind of look the same now from years of working for him. But like Rogan is listened to by everyone. And every person, and I can tell you, Vice editors and other people have told me this, like everybody's dream is to have their article on the front page of the Drudge Report. It doesn't mean you like what Drudge is doing, but it means your analytics will explode. I mean, your site will shut down if he gets a link up there.
Is he still that big?
It's like the front page of it. Really is the internet's front page. It's the first thing I look at every day.
Never seen anything Drudge for 15 years, and I heard they were number one. I don't know if it was podcasts or something like that, but just monstrous.
I'm not sure where that site ranks in terms of traffic, but it's incredibly high. And the amazing thing is, like, the infrastructure of that site has not changed at all. It's a white page with some black links that generally cater, I think, towards conservatives, but and also his like dislike of people like the Clintons, but he produces so little content. It's entirely borrowed. I don't think he's written 1,000 words in the past decade. He just posts links.
What a fucking hero.
Yeah. That's one of the best operations in some ways that exists. A website that looks like it's from 1996. It just has ever-changing links on it. And like one sentence from him at the top of the page, like breaking, Clinton email hacked, something like that.
That's an aesthetic that Bog Beef loves. You're always talking about when somebody has a website that looks like came from GeoCities circa 2002.
I love those sites. They're so easy to navigate.
Yeah, I sent him one the other day. There's a website, and it hasn't changed since like 1988. It looks like this industrial function. Whenever there's a hurricane or something, there'll be like water in all caps passed out. It's Soviet.
Yeah.
I love that. Like if you have an ounce of working class in you, you just yeah. I love it.
I've done this bit before on Twitter, but if you go into Walmart and you go down to the aisle that has like the paper towels, they have one brand that's it's a plain plastic wrapper. It's got a big black block and in it white block letters, paper towels, and that's the kind I buy every time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is something like that. These old websites are as like functional and ugly as 1960s industrial looking buildings. These like brutal industrial structures, these big squares. I love them. Like markprindle.com, people should go to it. It's got like 5,000 record reviews on it. The guy was just insane when he was writing them. He no longer writes anything, but like they're all on there and they're in that Drudge Report format. You can just click through and read them. And that was a time, the 90s, where you could just write anything online. So you could just write anything. It could be crazy. And you could your own style could truly be your own style. Like if you were in the MIRC chat room or something like that, you could have your own personal thing and
use that. And because they kept all the normies over in AOL.
Yeah, they were in their controlled. I mean, that was still like ASL Central over there. Like that was like, everybody was masquerading as a young girl or something on there for whatever reason. It's all that was in those rooms, men talking to other men. But yeah, they were all over there. And so like in these really ugly corners of the internet, like MIRC, I mean, really ugly interface, functional, but very ugly. These people were there. And I mean, it just deeply, just saying the craziest stuff. And I mean, it wasn't like, I know people want to go back and reconstruct it. I resist it in every article I've written about it. Even the bodybuilding forums, like it didn't create the alt-right or anything like that. It didn't emerge. Like those people had many different views. Often their views were just very bleak and nihilistic. They weren't political at all. I don't remember politics being much of a thing in that era other than the guys just assumed everyone was a liar. Which is a great thing to assume. I mean, that's been my politics for years.
Troll on Usenet, the connotation had no political. Now, like troll just sort of means like some sort of like aggressive dialogue thing, whatever. But back then it was like sowing confusion, like just for a laugh or whatever. There is one example of what you said, making someone alt-right. And it's kind of because we talked about we may have talked about Nick Land a little bit. So this was a guy. So he was one of these people. So he was doing that. You know, he was on this early internet stuff and used that. And they were like, wow, the internet is going to change everything. This is this Wild West in thoughts and ideas. And this guy's like an orthodox Marxist and everyone loves him. And then the internet's sort of growing up. And then Facebook comes out and he's like, wait a minute, this is the future, and then he becomes a neo-Nazi, like kill everybody. This is the world must be destroyed.
Yeah, well, you can't have a frontier. It's just like the West ended with the fences and enclosures. They're getting rid of anonymity online, and that's going to be the end of that. It's going to be by the time we're old. It's going to be just like every other form of communication, extremely policed and boring, and none of the excitement that I started getting online when I was like 14 years old in the like mid 90s. And I mean, there was crazy stuff going on constantly, and there was no supervision. There was rampant credit card fraud by everybody. Stuff like that just you couldn't imagine it now happening. That's deep web stuff now. That was going on everywhere, and this time has gone on, and the internet it's become something for normies, and now they're doing their damnedest to put it under lock and key. It's like every once in a while that Twitter will talk about having verification like Facebook, right? That make everybody tweet under your own name. Like you're supposed, like when you sign up for Facebook now, you're supposed to give them your legal name, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Is that the case? Jeez.
I don't use it anymore, but I've heard that. But they were talking about this for years ago for Twitter that, hey, make everybody get verified so everybody can go on the record. Isn't that the most horrible thing you could possibly imagine?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole point of, and it's sad, like anonymity. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some weird stuff going down in the 90s throughout it. Of course there was. It was very weird. It was weird in a way you couldn't quite put your finger on it. It was weird in a way, but because it was totally anonymous, it was often anons talking to anons. Like I didn't meet some of my good friends from that era until the 2000s or later or never. And you could turn it off and then go back to your real life, like pushing a broom or cleaning the toilets at the Golden Corral or wiping guys' asses, which all things that I did over the years. Not proud of them. Did them for the money, the Benjamins. But like you could turn off coming out of one of those jobs and then log on, and because there were no normies there. It was your own little frontier, and that frontier has closed. That frontier. It's like the closing of the American West. That frontier is gone. We were veterans of the Wild West. I mean, it's silly to think of it like, some like weird, like Warcraft 2 playing, Pimple Face is like a cowboy, but I guess he kind of was.
Talk about Clerks earlier. I guess that was I can't remember if it was a certain kind of camera got down to like under 10K or something like that. But some sort of material conditions came about to where almost any asshole could get a camera together. And then you have this massive explosion of creativity go about, and then of course institutions catch up. And I think you saw that there for sure.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I mean, great films still come out, but I don't have the patience to watch them anymore. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that moment where just kind of there was a period where they sort of lost control of things, and like very random, odd movies would drop occasionally, like domestic movies.
Sure.
I mean, foreign films still are always weird, and that's great. But like now, I feel like the movie going product. I'll maybe stream some art house film, I guess, but the movie going product, the stuff that's in the theaters, is just very like corporate, prepackaged, poppy, formulaic franchise garbage, in a way that we never like we would have laughed at had all normies going to see Marvel movies in 1998 would have been the source of endless amusement for me. just the idea that they want to see this garbage.
It's almost beyond parody now. That like they go and select a director from that era who did exciting things. They'll have him direct half the movie, fire him, and bring in some normie bitch that produces the Big Macs of movies, and have him homogenize the movie. Like, you can't parody that. There's nothing closer to it.
No, you directed Swingers, man. All right, you can direct the Jungle Book 3. Here you go. And the sad thing is, I'd take the paycheck too. You guys would as well.
Oh hell yeah!
I direct like Pocahontas 9 and like Beauty and the Beast 15, whatever.
All the stuff I complain about people on this podcast, I'll complain about people online. I would do exactly what they do, probably for a lot less money. So I'm not trying to put myself up.
Yeah, I would gladly jump on. I mean, especially when it comes to these things, because there's no pride. I think that's the benefit for like a Jon Favreau. There's no dishonor because you don't have any pride to begin with. So there's nothing associated with that product other than showing up and making sure the cameras are in the right spots. I mean, the computers are going to fix most of it.
Yeah, I'm sure Al Pacino's like, look, kid, I really died like 20 years ago. And
yeah, I'm just fattening my savings account here.
I got grandkids. You fuck off,
Yeah, I will definitely play, Ganondorf in the Zelda movie. I'm Al Pacino. I will do it. How much? 100,000? Nah, maybe 500,000. I only want to have 5 minutes on screen, though. I want to get this done in 10 minutes. And I think that there's some crazy like day and work restrictions built into these things. I got to see how that sausage was made here in Pittsburgh. For 2 weeks, I was a script supervisor for RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan on a movie called Blood Brothers. And so I would just update basically you stand behind him and you update the script as it's like a vampire movie. But I was only shooting scenes related to two Italian boys playing with each other in a big house. So you just kind of like they change the angle of the camera or something from what the script says, and you write that down. It's very boring kind of stuff. But I saw how it was like rushed and bland. It was still 12-hour days and stuff. Like it was still rushed and bland. And I mean, the acting was like hack acting, and they were only filming to get the tax credits. And that's why like in some total like rookie like me was pulled in it. That was like, we got to have X number of days filming in Pittsburgh to qualify for tax credits. So I wound up on this crew. Someone just cold called me, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. And I realized that making the movies it's like the shots are pathetic. It's just pathetic. Like might look cool on the screen, but it's just kind of sad. Like guy hits one line in 1 minute. You do it 20 times, and then someone pieces it all together in the end. Very strange. It was also snowing all those days, so I hated being outside. It sucked.
Just now, it hit me like a freight train, like what we're still really witnessing here. We'll do politics. So politics, you have the politicians, right? There are these plastic people with great teeth. They're out front, and they're the ones talking and stuff. But everyone knew like Mitt Romney's a great example. What a he looks like a movie president. But it was acknowledged. There was no hiding it. There's people behind the scenes like Karl Rove and Frank Lunt. They're the ones making the sausage. This is the actual talent that's pushing this stuff out. With the fetishization of authenticity, well, now that's being purchased too. Now the person with the great teeth also needs to be able to purchase. They're going to purchase Bateman's words, and they have to be able to claim it for themselves because now they have to be authentic. You have to be the whole total package now.
I mean, growing up, I always thought like one of the greatest Americans, one of the truest Americans, because he was doing the work that Americans, this society has really culturally years of preparation and years of the way this area has evolved and years of the way our institutions have evolved. It's Ted Sorensen, who just wrote almost all the speeches for the Kennedys, who like wrote Kennedy's Profiles in Courage book, who basically like anytime John Kennedy wrote a sentence, Ted Sorensen could just restructure it. And it was just great lines. Like, the peace of the grave and the security of the slave, these are great lines, not peace for our time, but peace for all time. And this guy was just churning them out, and he was not visible in any way. He was just making his money, putting words, and then he put words in the mouth of Ted Kennedy. And Ted Kennedy gives this like awesome 1980, after being asleep on that campaign trail and literally not being able to answer a question, from Roger Mudd about why he wanted to be president. You should watch that on YouTube. It's incredible if you haven't. But like Ted Kennedy is like, awakened, pushed out onto the stage, and then just delivers this phenomenal 1980 speech about what democratic principles are and why like the centrist Jimmy Carter doesn't have them. And it's Ted Sorensen's writing once again. And it's just all of these catchphrases and cliches, but they're packaged together so well. Like it's that kind of G.K. Chesterton stuff where there's all of these like parallel sentence structures, that just kind of, that are very memorable.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I love the fact that all of these Kennedys are being propped up by some geek, some just Harvard educated kind of, just a true geek, I mean, what an easy, and I think Sorensen's like, he might've gone to a Midwestern school like Kansas or Nebraska, not even an Ivy League. So like this guy gets to be the voice of these people that everybody thinks are like cool young men who are just like probably blank slates or barely even like if you went off stage, like they probably just stared at the window, like, just for until you came back in, you got to write their words for them. I mean, you got to create their things that everyone believed they said.
By the way, full circle, JFK, he was one of the early juicers in the United States, wasn't he?
Well, he was taking steroids for pain relief, too, right? Inflammation related. And he was also, he was also on all kinds of painkillers. I mean, he was just a drug addict in the president. That's not his fault. I mean, he just had a bad back.
Today's average Twitter housewife was on the same drugs as JFK.
Yeah, they probably think that's kind of cool. It's kind of, I don't know if JFK is considered woke anymore or not. I haven't heard anybody weigh in on that.
Very sex positive.
I don't know the answer to that. He's kind of conservative. He was a red hunter, Robert Kennedy was like working with, what's his face? Joe McCarthy. Like he's kind of anti-red. I don't know if Kennedy's woke or not. He's kind of he was philandering too. That's not woke, I don't think.
I spent a lot of time in South Florida, and I dated a couple of Cuban girls. And you go in these Cuban houses, exile people. They have their own little culture and stuff. Yeah. They're all hardcore like Republicans, right?
Oh yeah. They're dyed in the wool.
Yeah, JFK, he fucked up Bay of Pigs, right? I mean,
it definitely didn't work out for him.
They hate him.
No, you go in their houses and
tried.
And in the Cuban exiles, if you're listening to this and I'm wrong, let me know. But I've seen it with my own eyes. They have pictures of JFK in their house, like
pictures of Jesus.
Pictures of Jesus. It's a whole nother world, and people can live off the JFK conspiracies forever. But
oh yeah. I mean, that guy definitely was. That guy definitely got off for some reason. We'll never know what it was. The fact that they quickly buttoned that up, that was a pro move.
To me, the whole JFK thing, what seemed like his issue was that his daddy got independent power. He didn't come up through the classic WASP stuff. His daddy was a drug dealer, basically, right?
Moonshiner, yep.
That's right. A rum dealer. Yeah. And then, I think the Sons were odd enough that you had to kind of, and also dumb enough that you could slow them down. You had to put brakes on that operation. Just like if somebody gets a little too big for their britches on Twitter, you got to cancel them.
Well, they killed the older brother on purpose. I just made it. This is my conspiracy theory I'm inventing right now. Yes,
the original one that caused all the the young one. But Robert gets smoked by an Iranian or something or
Palestinian.
Yeah, Palestinian. Okay, Sirhan or whatever.
Yeah, but the older brother died in World War II in this weird experimental flight where he was in a bomber and he was supposed to put it on remote control and jump out of it. He was Joe Kennedy Jr. Yes, and he mysteriously died. So
was he the one that was supposed to be the heir apparent?
Yes,
the big one.
He was the one that was being groomed to be president. And then
meanwhile, the lesser Kennedy screws up piloting a PT boat. And they've got to, cover that up. Byron White.
I heard he fell. They were asleep when they crashed into the Japanese destroyer.
I think that's the thing. And they had this lawyer, ex-Steeler Byron White, who just wrote up that incident report so beautifully that just really, really changed the game. Byron White got that Supreme Court appointment from Kennedy. That's a good trade. I would make that trade any day of the week.
Oh yeah.
He was on there 30 years almost. So that would be much better than the NFL. He's also the reason there's a basketball court in the Supreme Court. People are concerned about that. Byron White played basketball at Colorado University. He wanted a basketball court in there. So there's one upstairs. Just a bit of trivia.
We got any more business? We should start wrapping this up.
Oh yeah, bring it home. I want the listeners to really dig into muscle and steroid culture. You said there are a bunch of MFAs listening to this. They should be muscle fetish admirers. By the time they're done hearing this, just dig into the muscle and the beef.
It's the future. I've got that thing I paste all the time on Twitter where it's that woman. What's the thing where Andrew Yang gives you money?
Yeah, Yang Gang, the bag. Get that bag.
The UBI money?
Right.
Yeah, he's pushing the UBI. That's his big thing, right?
Yeah, and they're talking about this, and they're talking about, well, what would you do with it? And this woman says, well, I would take my UBI and I'd use the money to muscle worship bodybuilders.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's a good use of money.
Yeah. It's just you can see a different future for America ahead with that. Everything could work out.
That stimulates the economy. It keeps a lot of guys in business. I would always suspect that any alleged woman muscle admirer is just a man under an alias, but that's probably just my early '90s AOL thinking coming out.
No, you might be onto something like that.
That was a big thing in the early '90s. That has died down with the end of Anons. I mean, maybe there are still some debates about whether certain Anons are male or female. I've seen. I just noticed all these Anon accounts, and I'm like, that's interesting. But yeah, they're like Anon was a big thing in the '90s. It's assumed everyone. There were no women on the internet in the '90s. The early '90s. That was the rule. None. Just men. just a boys club, like this podcast. Just a boys club with no.
If we let them in, and look what happened.
Yeah.
There was the sexual dimorphism present though. When it's just too many, then it's it just becomes too materially advantageous. So they would just things just happen.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, the early '90s internet kind of divided the way a prison might, I think.
Yeah.
due to its odd representation. I mean, all kinds of different roles were assumed in on the frontier. A lot of frontier cultures were like that too.
Say what you want about Adam Smith, but supply and demand's a thing.
Yeah, some men attempted to supply that demand. It must have been a golden age for those. You can't say the word creep anymore, I don't think. There were a lot of good creeps on there back in the day. And no political leanings, no social agenda, just creeps. I miss that. It's just true awful. You could find some of the weirdest creeps. And I mean, the embodiment of it was like that Goatsy image that circulated. He's just some kind of random creep, and Gawker tracked him down a few years after that.
No. That's terrible.
He's just some dude. That's a good article. They just met him, and he was like a dude. Apparently was identified as straight or something, or bisexual or something odd in there, and that was just like the training that he did.
Sure.
That's the nowadays. If I saw that again on the internet, and this is the sad thing, if I saw that again on the internet, there would be like 1 million people into it. There would already be some people who are so much better than he was. They would be like mega pros. They would be on so many relaxers to get that air. They'd be on PEDs for that. There would be Wikipedias. There would be a built-in wiki for it, a league. Somebody would be sponsored. It'd be an e-sport. There'd be teams. And that's what's happened now. Everybody's such a seasoned pro, whereas he was just a true amateur, a lover of that thing. He didn't even know he was going to end up on there. Yeah, he didn't even know he's going to circulate on there. He just took the picture to commemorate whatever was going on there, and he's very successful ultimately as a well-known, but an amateur, not a pro. That's what I hate these pros. I don't like all this professionalism. I want us to keep that amateur ethic of the Goatsy alive.
The classic stump porn. The classic.
Yeah. I don't want my creeps to fall behind some kind of, I don't want them to have some kind of politics. I don't want them to have some kind of agenda. I don't need them to be organized. I just want a good creep who stays online, and only when Chris Hansen lures him out does he hit the road. when they're practicing when the TV, like for like 5 years, a TV network practiced entrapment. I just amazing. They just lured these men. Like the 90s internet had created them, and Chris Hansen just harvested them like big pumpkins.
And it ended in the perfect American way when Chris Hansen, they ambushed the guy and he just fucking blew his brains out.
The day was due to come. You know, he was from Texas, right, or something like a district attorney or something.
Yeah, he was somebody. Yeah,
someone of importance, and he just I mean, like, you know, who would have thought? You know, who would have thought that would be how this awful scam ends? And I think if that show had never existed, the internet would still be very different. Honestly, I think it would have developed differently. I don't think we realize its impact.
I believe Bateman said the internet would still be safe for pedophiles. No,
I mean, it would be safe for anons. Like, we wouldn't suspect that behind every anon was like a man that would be dragged away from his computer, you know, covered in filth, you know, and waiting to be exposed to the light of day.
You still had Jerry Springer. You remember the two biggest topics in there was transgenderism and the KKK.
Yeah, and these kind of also in very like immature, unsophisticated, cartoonish ways.
The internet has held up that tradition.
If you go through Jerry's episode listing, if you go through Jerry's episode listing, so much of it prefigures what would later develop into real movements once some academic theory got behind it, some discourse. Like, I remember an episode where somebody like wanted to have their limbs cut off because that was their thing.
Sure.
You know, they felt that they, you know, he would have them on, but only as oddities, you know, as freak shows, in addition to the staged ones that he was doing, or the ones that people were faking to go on. Like, the fact that people fake storylines to go on there is also great. Like, you know, that was another great aspect of that. But that was a show that was so primitive, you know, in a way. Looking back on it, you just like, these people could have been, if they'd had Twitter, they never would have ended up on, or Tumblr, they never would have ended up on Springer.
No, they'd be a think tank or something now, you know?
Yeah, they would be the kids online doing the work.
Point of privilege, Jerry.
Yeah, that's